Kind of tough for me to talk about, guys. We're going to talk about electrical contact here. Give you a little background here. This happened April 9th, 1987. You guys wonder sometimes why I'm tough on you guys, especially Poletop Rescue. This actually is my story. I think some of you have heard me mentioned in the past. I don't talk about it much, but I had to do a rescue. I was the rescuer one day. April 9th, 1987. That day is going to live in the back of my mind. You all remember a few years ago when I lost my crap when we were doing Poletop Rescue? Some of you guys that was around?
No, I was open. You lost it.
I lost it that week. I lost it that week. The reason why I lost it was some stuff that was being said to me, stuff about not knowing what I'm talking about, that kind of crap. April 9th, 1987, myself, I was a Class A lineman. I had 5 years, 3 months under my belt as a lineman. Class A lineman is a journeyman lineman. Charlie, he was a Class B lineman. A Class B lineman was what we would call a fourth-year apprentice. He was a hot apprentice. We had Steamy, we called him Steve. He was an apprentice, just a little under 2 years in his belt, and we had a groundman on the ground. The job that day, I don't need that. Well, yeah, I can put it up there so you can look at it. The job that day was we were doing an upgrade. We were adding a second service or a second primary. We were working on 8,000 volt phase to ground. All of our work was being done off our hooks. Truck was parked about a half mile. Charlie ended up making contact on the line. I'll talk more about that in a minute. We were going to convert to 2 separate circuits. We had to leave the whole thing hot. We couldn't shut down the circuit at all. We had a business down there. It was either Raytheon or Digital, high security military contract. You just don't shut them down. And we were building them a second dedicated circuit to them. They bought their own. Word I'm looking for. They paid to have their own circuit put in the substation. Everything. It was a dedicated circuit to it. So what we had to do, we were working on poles, 60 to 70 foot poles. So we went ahead, we climbed the poles. This was what we were going to do that day. We were going to put a bracket up there and install the sheave to pull in the Hendrix cable. We had to lower the cross arm that the circuit was on. There was a 3-phase transformer with 4-wire clothesline built in on that. We were going to eliminate that, put quad. We were going to run a neutral because that had what is it? A common neutral. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what a common neutral is. We don't have to do that. Lower the rack. We were going to install a separate circuit. So anyway, that's pretty much the important information you need to know about the job that day. So anyway, we're sitting there, we're working. Charlie's over on this pole. I'm just upstream, working on the other pole. Charlie had to go up, and he went up. We both rubbered, or I'll go off on his. He had everything rubbered up on top, and the first job he had to do was he had to drill a hole for the TA2 bracket. When we drilled the hole, our secondary service we were running was 480, so we had to do all the drilling old school way, bit and brace. Had to drill another hole for a cross arm so we could move that cross arm down and stuff. So I'm sitting on the other pole and I was busy doing whatever I was doing on that pole. I was, actually I was doing my drilling at the time, and all of a sudden I hear Steamy holler, "Wait, Jerry said not to do that yet," or something like that. You know, Jerry's not ready. And he said, and then I heard him say, nobody's in here, "It's fucking Delta. I'm moving it," or something to that extent. No rubber gloves on, no nothing on. He starts untying it, and that's when I heard it, you know, the whole shit. I start coming down, and Steamy there, he's on the ground freaking out, and I'm yelling at him to get his ass up the pole. Let's get the rescue. He froze. Jeff, I told Jeff to run back the truck to make the Mayday call. Like I said, he was, I want to say a half mile, which as far as I know, it might have only been a half a pole span away, but it was, we were back in probably 4 or 5 pole spans. And I'm sitting there. I had to climb up and get ready to start doing rescue. You know, I didn't dare start cutting stuff down because you don't cut anything under load, under anything. So I had to climb past the bracket, the 4-wire clothesline, and everything else. And I get up there and I get ready to start performing my rescue. And I go to give him, first thing I do is give him the carotid thump. We don't teach that anymore, but that's what we did. I went to try to give him a couple breaths. I couldn't get air in. So at that point I do the tongue finger sweep, and out goes his part of his tongue. He bit his tongue off when he got electrocuted. He'd already fallen down, and at that point I get air into him, and I knew it was going to be a while. I'm yelling at Steamy. Matter of fact, I threw my bell wrench at him. Basically told him he was a worthless piece of shit. As he's sitting there, he froze. He couldn't do rescue. He couldn't do anything there. You know, shit, he couldn't even run a hand line for me. You know, hand line's up there. And so anyway, so then I get him and I go try to push him up against the pole, got him flipped around to try to do chest compressions. And because he was too heavy for me to lift and throw on my belt, because we used to train, you get them up on your belt and you start. About that time, Jeff gets back and he's already, he starts sending me shit up so I could start cutting stuff free. So I get everything cut free at service, or the wires, the clothesline cut down, just taking forever. You know, because you have to jack everything up, cut it, release it, jack it back down. No fucking help on the ground. You know, from the other guy. Couldn't get anybody else up in the air to help me. So finally get everything cut down except for the phone cable. Probably toll cable, and I didn't have nothing big enough to cut that anyway. Plus it had the messenger on there. How am I going to cut that with a pair of lines? So get up. Again, I start giving him a couple breaths to get his ass down there. And Jeff grabs a hand line, and I get down to the phone line so I could push him away. So now he hits on the ground, and I get down and I start doing CPR on him. Shortly thereafter, EMS comes there, and the guys claim that I wouldn't let anybody do CPR on him except for me. I did about half-hour CPR maybe. You know, and the hard part about it is I look back, I was giving CPR to a dead man. He was DOA when they arrived there. And, you know, this, and I think about this, you know, Charlie, young kid, he was probably 24 years old, 25. I taught him how to ice fish. They never, out in Massachusetts out there, they never ice fish. And they great ice fishing, taught him to ice fish, you know. Him and I, we'd go out sniffing on a Friday night. You guys know what I mean? You know, be each other's wingman, that kind of stuff, you know. Good linemen and stuff. But after everything's done, you know, whose fault was it? And I made a phone call that night, and I called an old lineman that had been through this before. You know, I didn't know what to do. And the sad thing about it is this old lineman was my dad. My dad lost 2 guys in his crew back in the 50s. And, you know, how do you handle this? You watch a guy die. I mean, to this day, I can still close my eyes and I can still see his foot turned 180 degrees. He snapped his foot. Got him on the ground, was giving him CPR, and I'm getting wet, and that's his blood coming out of his leg because he snapped his leg. You know, I tried to tie a tourniquet up on the pole on his leg. You know, took my shirt off, and you know, you can't build a tourniquet, you know, out of that. And all I was told was, you know, I talked to my dad, you know, Marine, he was a former Marine, he was out in the DMZ, he was a sniper, he was a lineman, you know, he dealt with death, saw death all the time. All he said was, you know, he goes, "Is it your fault?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I think so." He goes, "Did you touch the line? Did you tell him to touch the line? Were you doing, you know, all that stuff?" And he said, "Well, you know, that's the dangers of this work. Man up, go have a beer. Just every time you have a beer in his name. Leave an extra can there for him." We were drinking beer. And I mean, I struggled with this for a lot of years. And Mark heard about it. I think everybody heard about it because I lost my shit. And so I went and I went and got some therapy, still seeing a therapist once in a while. You know, one of the things is, you know, did I handle it right or wrong? You know, did I talk about it? Do we talk about it? You know, it's important that we get out there. There's, you know, it just weighs on you. As I go back and look, I can't say this whole thing has done it. I'm on my 3rd marriage. I tried to commit suicide twice in my life. None of you guys here really know me. I think Sammy, he went to a conference and he supposedly heard some stories about me, but I was a functioning alcoholic. I mean, I'd go to work every night, get off work every night, sit there in the bar all night long, drink, you know, all that stuff. So again, it's just one of those things that stuff happens. I think that it's important that you guys hear my story, because this can happen to anybody, any day. You know, and what's really depressing out there is I see us when we do our Poletop rescue, not just us here at Rio Grande, but in the industry, people don't take it serious. We don't practice it enough. It's always a joke, you know, and it's not a joke out there, guys. You know, anytime, you know, you always got to plan for the worst. So, any questions? Mark, you got any questions? You've been around long enough, you know, I'm sure you got some ideas.
Ideas, but when something traumatic like that happens to you, it sticks there. Even if it's not, you're at work. Just dealing with it. Everybody deals with stuff in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, by God, I was a lineman. I sat on the right hand of God. There's nobody that can do my work. Very few people can do my work, let alone very few people work hot off a pole. You know, And the sad thing about it is I don't know what, well, I can tell you what, I know slightly what happened to Steamy. He got ran off. I ran him off. He didn't come back to work the next day. I know for a fact that he got completely out of line work. He became a severe alcoholic. I know that for a fact. He was from up in Watford City, North Dakota, and that's where when I went to work up there, I asked people if they knew him, and yeah, he was the town drunk. You know, we don't know how we're ever going to react when we see those things. To this day, there's certain things that will set me off. The smell. You know, you've heard me tell you guys through some of our training and stuff. You know, you don't know what it's like until you smell flesh burning. You don't know what it's like until you've touched a body that's still hot. You can see the steam coming off from them from being burned. Do we always do an all stop? Do we have control to do all stop? No. The thing that comes into my head is, you know, it's Delta.
Delta's dangerous.
Huh?
Delta's just as dangerous as it is.
Delta's just as dangerous. I know you guys don't work around this. This is a different era, a different time, but
24480 is Delta.
yeah.
And it'll get you just as quick as.
But on a 3-wire Delta, on a 3-wire Delta, what happens if you throw a ground on a 3-wire Delta? Nothing.
Nothing will happen.
Nothing will happen until another ground is put on there. Then it's all hell. Because
For our residents, that's why they put that.
yeah,
Or before you close it in, you gotta close that fourth switch on.
yeah.
Because of that.
You know, but we used to always work Delta without rubber gloves, always. Some of us did, some of us didn't, but yeah, I mean, you know, again, 1987, what was there for OSHA? We were following our safety rules. OSHA didn't come into effect in our industry until 94. We had diving boards there. That's the other thing. We were, Steamy was ready for his hands-on assessment to see if he can jump up to being a Class C lineman. So he was actually supposed to get up and help move the conductor. But it was supposed to be done off from diving boards, not off the hooks. And why didn't we have it on one shot? We couldn't put it on one shot. And besides, we weren't supposed to be doing that. We weren't supposed to be doing that yet. Because we weren't going to put it on one shot to put it on rubber and drill. It was going to go on one shot when we got ready to move the conductor. Once we were going to hand on the conductor and start moving stuff down. You know, sometimes we jump the gun. You know, so.
In Jose's case, the one that was electrocuted in Del City, we just had a brand new apprentice come on board with him. They went out to the location, he made contact. That apprentice was never the same. He left.
Yeah.
From what I heard, he's no longer in the business. But it affected him that much after he did the rescue. He survived, Jose survived, missing legs, missing a leg, missing an arm. Internal problems for now.
Yeah, it's so you guys just need to know why sometimes I get a little irate, why I sit there and tell you, I don't know if we have that problem here, but we do have problems of that in various parts of our territory where we have to go back and we might have to make a second and third trip just to have rescue stuff with us or to do stuff like that. One of the questions I was asked yesterday, did you have a hand line? No, we didn't have a hand line. There was no such thing as a hand line when I worked. It was a safety line. We always had a safety line in the air. We didn't call it a hand line. Hand line was a piece of P rope. You always have a hand line. You know, do we always take that? We had everything there. We planned the job out. We had every tool on the job site that we needed to complete that job, so we didn't have to And we hauled a couple, 2, 3 trips, you know, we had all of our coffin hoists, we had all of our, you know, everything we needed there. And we go out there today and I see that, you know, guys climbing poles, and where's their climbing gear? It's in the back of the truck, but what's over the top of that climbing gear? Material. If Steamy could have climbed, do you think that would have saved him? No. He took 4 shots, went through all 4 operations. Nothing could have done on that. Should he had his rubber gloves on? Yeah. Why he thought it was Delta? The only thing I can think of to this day is because it had a common neutral. There wasn't a 4th wire. They were using the service neutral as the 4th wire.
That's your resistance right there. That's your resistance right there.
So, yeah.
It's not Delta no more.
But it was common. I mean, living in San Antonio and El Paso, I see common neutral all the time. I mean, it's just common. It saves money. You know, if you went to convert from Delta to Y, you didn't always run a neutral. You just used that service wire, and that was it. And if you didn't have a service, then you'd run a neutral, and then you'd tap into that service wire at that neutral and run down again.
AEP, if they had a Delta system, they run 2 or 3 poles north or south of whatever equipment they have with the common neutral and bring it down with the actual ground rod on the Delta side.
Yeah.
And that's how they're doing away with string and neutral.
So, like I said, I'm just starting to talk about it and stuff, but it's part of it's also therapy for me. I'm not afraid to admit that I went, God help, I still see help once in a while. But, it's something you guys gotta be aware of out there and stuff.
Now that's where it makes it kind of difficult too, because you said one of your guys just stopped and didn't react to anything to
Yeah.
help, right?
Yeah, no,
There's certain individuals that will stop
yeah,
because they've never gone through anything like that, but there's also certain individuals that never run to the problem.
yeah,
They will rather run away from the problem than run towards the problem. And that's one of the things that a lot of individuals have. We don't know what we can do until that moment happens. That's the
Yeah.
only thing. Are you gonna be the one that's gonna run to the problem, or are you gonna be the one not running to the problem?
and that is the biggest thing right there, cause you don't know how you're gonna react. You know, we train and train and train and, you know, again, I'm just gonna go back. When I teach Poletop rescue, I know Jordy, I don't know if Pedro, a few of the guys sat into it. And I keep telling the guys to do it this way, and they don't do it. And, you know, and that's because we used to have to pull a guy on our belt. And it's so much easier just to grab the guy to tie him that way. But you know, I'm a firm believer, the more you practice it, if something is gonna happen, that practice will kick in at that point. But again, you don't know how anybody's gonna react, and that's the scary part.
Yeah, because when you mentioned that when you were doing your Poletop rescue, and yeah, a lot of us don't know what you went through or what you saw, what you smelled and stuff. But when I was a volunteer firefighter for the Cruiser Fire Department for 9 years, I ran to the problem.
Yep.
And yes, I did get a chance to smell a person that burned, because we had to go into that building.
Yeah, you have to.
And that person was pretty much in skeleton by the time I got to him. So that smell and everything, I
Yeah, you
understand
know
what
it,
you
yeah,
smell.
and I had,
But it always depends on the person itself.
yeah,
Are you gonna be a one that runs to the problem or away from the problem? Now, right
Right.
now, in this day and age, we're running into so many things that are going on in the world that any one of us in this room could go to a movie with our families, a mall, whatever the case may be. Are you gonna carry a gun?
yeah,
Now, are you gonna run to the problem or are you gonna run away from the problem?
yeah.
Because you won't know.
Yeah, you don't know until you're in that situation at all. Like you were saying, Max, on firefighter, I had a good friend of mine, you know, he was firefighter, EMS, did all that stuff. And he was always the first one on scene, he'd do it, and he ended up quitting. Accidents didn't bother him one bit, until the accident, he pulled up and there was 2 dead kids. He could never go to another accident scene, ever again.
Yeah, the one accident that we had, there was a car that wrecked between Crystal City and Carrizo with a family in it. And that people, I knew the people.
Yeah,
And the guy had his hair cut off. When I arrived to that scene, that hurt me more because I knew the person, I knew the people. And I couldn't perform the way I should have because I knew the people. Kind of pulled me back a little bit. But then I knew that they had kids in the back seat, so I had to
yeah,
not be locked and scared or whatever the case may be, and get them out as soon as I can. But it's kind of hard to ask some of these individuals or these guys, what will you do? Well, we won't know until it happens.
Yeah.
And when it happens, that's going to be the test.
that's like when we talk about Poletop rescue, we say, well, do you make the Mayday call first, or what do you do first? I always give this standard answer, I'm not going to tell you what to do because I know what I'll do. And chances are what I'll do is going to be wrong, but I also hope with all the years of training and stuff that I would, if I'm a 2-man crew, I'd make that call first. Because also then we want to perform a rescue, not a 2-man recovery team, a recovery. But again, you can't answer that question. We see this all the time, you know, especially in confined spaces. Guys dropping end up being a 4 or 5-man recovery effort in a confined space because we wanted, and I know that's what I did. I wanted to get up there and do, I was the senior guy. I had the most experience, you know. Again, I was 5.5 years in, you know, working a lot of stuff hot over the years. You know, should have we waited until the line was de-energized? Again, couldn't get the line de-energized until he got to the truck to radio it. You know, again, Steamy there, he wasn't worth a shit, he couldn't do nothing. You know, couldn't send him off to knock out the line somewhere. You know, cause that would have been the next thing, but also when he hit, he fell back like this anyway, so he's off the line. You know, go from there. So, the biggest thing I was worried about was start cutting wire and that pole coming down, and we both becoming crippled because the pole fell. Because at that time, we had a lot of linemen that were crippled because they cut under pressure, or they didn't control the wire, and the pole fell. And then they were paralyzed or busted up from that, so. But yeah, if you ever need to talk about something like that, any questions, you know, feel free to ask. I may not answer them right then. But other than that, that's about all I got. You know, if you guys don't have any questions. Lunch here yet? Gonna lighten it up. Lunch here yet?
I'm not sure. I know that truck took long.